Okay, welcome back. I hope you had a break. That was an amazing session we've just come through. And again, I'd just like to say to David Benjamin, that was fantastic. Thank you so much for all of the effort put into that presentation. This conversation that we're just about to have is really a kind of relaxed lounge, and we've invited 3 people to come and speak to us. So the purpose of this really is to almost hear from the audience, and we've invited Cristina, Nan and Adam West and Adam Davies, and I'll get them each to introduce themselves in a minute, really because I think they are our audience, I suppose, to some extent. Maybe Cristina has a different view in that. And we're keen to hear what people have to say about that. So we're going to start by asking them to give a short presentation of who they are so that you can contextualize their reflections and responses. And then I have a series of questions, which I rapidly have to dig out from my email, that I've sort of thought through and what I'd like them to consider. But this time around, we're not going to ask the audience to give us questions to ask the audience, in effect. What we're going to ask you to do is put your responses to the questions that I put to our 3 panelists today, and put that within the chat. So we're really interested to hear your reflections and your ideas to some of the questions that I'm going to pose. So let's get going. I'll stop sharing, and Adam West, would you like to share your screen and go from there?
Okay. Hi. Hi, Ruth. Hi, Adam, Cristina. Thanks, first of all, for inviting me to this amazing presentation and 4-day summit. Can you see my screen? No, probably not. Can you hear me, Ruth?
Not yet. We can see you, and we can hear you, but we can't yet.
Yeah, I knew this would happen. Combination of. Right. Can you see the screen now?
No, not yet.
We can hear you fine. We just can't see the screen.
Okay.
That's popping up. No, just as I've said that.
Yes.
We're ready. We're all go.
Excellent. Right. Yes. Thank you very much for inviting me. I feel that this is going to be a bit of a contrast to some of the amazing things I've been watching over the last couple of days. This is a building that CZWG designed back in the 80s. I'm a director at CZWG Architects, a practice which has actually been around for 45 years. And we made our name long before me in the Docklands. I can't move on. Why is that? Here we go. With a series of buildings which were about regenerating the Docklands and turning it back into use. These buildings were kind of designed and built in a postmodern era where there was a change in ideas about modernism had failed, and the idea of symbolism and meaning coming back into architecture was seen as really important, and the jettisoning of all of that and the wiping away of history with modern architecture was seen as a bit of a failure. So we were building things in the Docklands when there was nothing else there. So this is a view of the Docklands back when Cascades was built, which was one of 6 buildings that was listed recently, along with the China Wharf, which was that first building, which was seen as, they're both seen as symbols of sort of good examples of post-modernist architecture. This I thought was a bit of interesting, just to see what's happening today. That's the same view. Cascades was kind of seen as the harbinger of new buildings coming at Canary Wharf. And this is what's there now, and I think it's perhaps a good illustration of the challenges that we face with global warming and so on. And then sort of as a quick change of tack, and I'll whiz through some of the other things that we've done over time. This is a Docklands view I thought I'd show you for the people in Newcastle. It's an office building that was built by us on the far right. And then down at the other end of the country, this is in Southampton. It's an arts complex which combines residential, art gallery, auditoriums, restaurants, and so on. And a view back the other way, showing the sort of the relationship between the existing buildings and our buildings, and sort of the two different faces, the sort of the parkland and the city beyond. Something a little bit different, a Maggie Centre in Nottingham, which was designed as a cancer care centre. They're built all over the country, these Maggie centres that you may have heard around, but this is sitting in trees, and a very playful sort of idea, which is something that we enjoy doing, lifting the spirit and playing with colour. And then in terms of innovation, sort of CZWG, I guess it's more about, historically, it's been more about how we work within the city, how people might live in the buildings. These are designed as loft spaces, so all the apartments were empty, allowing people to do their own internal designs as they wished, in the style of sort of Manhattan lofts. But also buried underneath here is a 1950s office block, as well as the old warehouse building that you can see in the centre there. So it was about sort of reimagining this old building and reusing it. Again, another old building that's recently been opened, reusing a huge Edwardian post office sorting office in Islington. So a sort of fantastic existing stock, bringing it back to life, creating a new boulevard, sort of pedestrian street on the front, something real exciting public realm for the benefit of everybody else, but still a little bit of playful behind the scenes work. We still like to have some fun where we can. So this is a view, the same building. These are in the distance, you can see affordable housing units, and then beyond that, the view of the City of London. And then this is something more sober. This is more, this is for affordable housing, for a housing association. It's a new piece of city over in the west of London, the first part of the Old Oak Common development, where we're using more sort of traditional materials for, which is happening more and more. New clients, existing clients, Redrow Homes, Barratt, Berkeley Homes. Really, the big challenge is to get them to maybe think about the future in a slightly different way. This is sort of traditional housing, more suburban in scale. And then here, something which is sort of a bit of hope for the future, in the sense that this is Berkeley Homes. And what we're doing here is really integrating the nature of the parkland around with new housing. But the really important thing here is to try and create very diverse communities and introduce and intermingle houses and flats together, so that there's a much greater mixture of the community, and also allowing sort of the penetration of the countryside into that sort of new housing. So that's a sort of a whiz through the architecture of CZWG,
Great, Adam, that's
see what
fantastic.
everybody else
That gives
has
us
to
a really
say.
good place setting. Thank you so much. Adam, Davies, do you want to share your screen?
Yes, of course. 1 second. Can you see it? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, great. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. My name is Adam Davies. I'm the co-founder of Syml. We're an experimental product design studio based in Pembrokeshire, South Wales. We are formed basically from my master's degree, where I was kind of infuriated with the amount of plastic waste on some of the local beaches here in Pembrokeshire. This is one of them. This is Freshwater West. It's quite a famous beach in Pembrokeshire. It's one of the beaches where they filmed one of the Harry Potter films on, because it's incredibly beautiful. But looking at it from that, it looks perfectly beautiful and fine. But when you take a closer look, the amount of plastic waste that was ending up on the beach was quite dramatic over a very short amount of time. So I really wanted to find a solution for this. So for my master's degree, I started to explore how we could initially use plastic waste from this beach to create products. And this formed this stool that we did here. So the whole stool is basically made from the plastic waste on that beach. And then I started to realize that most plastic waste is created from product designers, my profession that I was going into. So is there a way of changing the materiality of what we produce? So if our products did end up back on these locations, that the environmental impact wasn't be as severe as the plastic that we find. So for my master's, I basically spent a whole year on this beach playing with seaweed, experimenting, grinding it down into a powder, making a glue from it. So collecting just any type of seaweed I found, refining it and seeing what would be best to create a biocomposite from this. So I ended up using bladderwrack, which is quite common on most beaches around the UK. And from that, I made a biocomposite which used newspaper paper pulp that I grinded and pulped myself and combined it with the seaweed glue to make this composite. And from that, I decided I wanted to make products which could actually be sold and used within retail environments. So this is our first product that we made from this material. This is called Algu. So the whole process of my master's developed into everything that we do at Syml now. So all the materials that we develop is through a process of experimentation with the intention of it being applied to certain projects at the end of it. So this is the light that's hanging in, some of the lights that are hanging in Silo, London, which is the world's first zero waste restaurant. And we were very fortunate to be a part of this restaurant because there's a load of other material experimenters that were able to apply their products to this. So this crown from the Netherlands that have mycelium tables and that kind of thing. And these are our lights here hanging above them. So there's a lot of, like I said, a lot of process experimentation. I wanted to put this in here quickly. This is something that I made last week, very rough and very quick. We were commissioned by a bakery that's opening 10 new bakeries in London and Cornwall. And what they wanted was these really flat discs of our seaweed material. And I knew initially that there's going to be issues that because when it dries, it warps quite a lot. So I was a bit concerned that the client wouldn't like this, but the response that we had from it is that the natural drying of it created these unique forms. So we've been commissioned to make 90 of these, and all of them are going to be slightly different because of the drying process, which is quite nice. I like the whole idea that the form of it is changed by a natural process. Another material that we experimented with is mycelium that David spoke about previously. So we're using a lot of wood waste with mycelium, combining it to create paneling. And this was initially our experimentation, firstly, and it proved successful. And then this has since developed into applying it to lighting. And this is some of our lighting in Free Berlin, so another zero waste restaurant in Berlin. And then we were approached by a project in Duved, Sweden. And what we were asked to do with that is to go there and look at the environment locally to Duved and to create lighting for the new restaurant opening there. So this is what we come up with. So locally, there's a waterfall that freezes in the winter, and it has a really stepped type of scenario that happens. So this was the inspiration for this light, and we were fortunate that they actually commissioned us to have them in the restaurant, and this is the outcome of growing in the mycelium. And what they love about it is that the coloring is changed during the growing process. So each one is individually different as well. So this really shows that discoloration due to the growing. So there's some bits which are pure white and other bits are then this discoloration. And I think a lot of our clients really like the uniqueness of each of the products that we make. That's us in a short, brief presentation. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Adam. If you want to share, and if Cristina, if you can share yours. I'm sorry for having this so short, but.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, yes.
Yes, perfect. Hi, everyone. So I'm Cristina. I'm an assistant professor at TU Eindhoven in the Netherlands and also co-founder of Future Fields think tank. And I'm just going to walk you very quickly through on the type of practice I have regarding materials, prototyping, and digital fabrication processes. So this is some very early work from doing my PhD done at the EAC Institute, Mini Builders, where as a group, we not only designed the machines, right, but we also designed material system to go hand in hand with it, based on marble powder at the very beginning, with all sorts of epoxy resins. And I guess there the idea was not so much the material itself, but really looking at the tool of making and saying, well, we have this maxi systems for construction sites, we have now the robots, which are these MIDI systems, but what in terms of finding another scale, really the tool scale, and apply that to robotic systems within architecture and on the construction side. So this is how the mini builders then came along. Here we can see them on the site printing away, and then also the third robot, the vacuum robot, printing vertically along the walls. And then the last 5 years I've spent them as assistant professor at the University of Edinburgh, and there together with students, particularly from the MSc material practice, we really looked into multi-materiality at clay and silicon printing, developing our own 3D printers, and then crossing these techniques with other techniques. So for instance, here with fabric formwork, in order to be in better control of geometry, where we started to print with our silicon printer on the textile to really modify the behavior, but also the aesthetic, the overall aesthetic of concrete, right? To then now I'm assistant professor at the TU Eindhoven, to then taking this type of practices and transferring them or translating them to 3D concrete printing. Unfortunately, we never completed the ARC because of COVID-19 and no access anymore to the workshop, but we're working on it, right? To then also trying to apply the logic of computational design, right, and very specific material properties to other types of systems. For instance, here we have a parametric reciprocal frame structure that was built for the Truman Brewery in London a couple of years ago, to then taking this type of practices and translating them, for instance, to paper. So here, this is a minimal surface that was built out of paper that was worth £5, to then, scaling it up to building the full installation for the Festival of Architecture in Montpellier, where the installation was substantially more expensive than that, but where also we work, for instance, with two materials, recycled PETG and a vinyl film on top of that, and really trying to play with light and shadow effects. To then, when working with students, it's really all about prototyping and moving from the small scale of the object or of the model to really large scale stuff. So for instance, here trying to build minimal surfaces out of paper over several stories in a staircase in Edinburgh, to then building Voronoi cells out of cardboard, all sorts of experiments relating to CNC milling, different types of clays, cement, gypsum, and trying to see, right, how geometry and material mixture are connected to one another, to then also all sorts of explorations with, for instance, metal and or steel and digital fabrication practices, to then trying to apply the learned things from really material experiments to the design studio, where, for instance, right, we were looking at super infrastructures, recycling oil and gas and infrastructures for architecture with our students. I'm just going to run super quickly to this, to then now quite recently working on a commission study on circularity in bio-based materials in architecture and the challenges that come along with their implementation and practice, but also academia.
Great. Could you unshare your screen, Cristina?
Sure.
So you can breathe now. So thank you so much for going through that so quickly. But I think it's really important whenever people hear others talking about themes that they understand the context from which they're speaking. So I really appreciate that. I just have an opening question, and this opening question is also to people on YouTube, so you can type into the chat. I'm going to reframe this slightly, which is, what is of interest in this area? You know, from the last 4 days, and also even just from the stuff that you've heard today, what interests you individually in this area? And I think this is speaking from a personal level, and also what might raise concerns, or what troubles you, or what don't you get? So, Adam Davies, do you want to just have a response to that?
Yeah. So the interest is purely, for me, the impact I see, obviously local to where I am. That's the whole reason why I started this, and then trying to show interior architects and designers that these materials and products that we're designing can be used in these situations. So we get questioned a lot about the materiality of the product and how they fit within the projects that they're doing. And there's a lot of not negativity, just questioning if it's applicable to what they do. And that's something that we have to try and work on with them. And as we have a really good narrative for our products anyway. And I think when we show that narrative, people get inspired by it, kind of thing.
So the narrative's important behind the whole process of it. And Cristina, what would be your response? What's of interest to you in this area, and where's your concerns or your fears?
I think particularly what came across in the summit in the last days was really the marrying of the really scientific fields and chemistry, biology, but really in depth, like really from the micro level right to then the architectural level. I think this is of super interest because as a discipline, we always looked at biomimicry, right, and trying to translate principles and so on. But it's quite a different thing to then say, well, okay, we're actually going to do in-depth research as architects with material scientists, with biologists and chemists, because that for me is a route for success in terms of also getting market-ready technology or products that can be easily used and implemented. And I think that's also at the same time the most worrying thing. So because it is working now with hand in hand with other fields that are that, let's say, not within the comfort zone of the architect or the designer, that maybe we might lose control of those processes in terms of what we want to get out of them for the built environment.
Very good. Yeah, really interesting. And Adam, where is your thinking about what you've heard over the last while?
I mean, the reason that this interests me is because I think in a really simple term would be to say the climate emergency, you know, and trying to find ways, or hoping that somebody is looking to find ways of dealing with this problem. But I mean, it goes back a lot further, you know, a long way back. I've always been interested in the natural world and seen it as a you know, vital part of the sort of the human condition, and wanting to have as little impact on it as possible as the, you know, the human species. So I think for me it's just an interest in seeing what people are doing with trying to reduce waste, I suppose, you know, generate energy and those kind of issues. So it's been a real eye-opener for me, some of the things that I've been able to see. And I think what's really today, what I've really enjoyed as well, is just the beauty of some of the work that I've seen, you know, from David, and also just from Cristina just now, and other things that I've seen. But that's very much a kind of taking this kind of microbiological level and increasing, I suppose, scaling it up to an art gallery. And the real challenge, you know, is actually scaling it up to mass housing and dealing with the other problems that we've got, you know, affordable housing and a lack of housing, and the climate emergency, and how we can reduce
Yeah.
embodied
So
carbon.
you started to kind of move into that area, what the challenges are, you know, that, and maybe the gaps in our thinking already, but and maybe I'll bring that back to Cristina about challenges. I mean, when we first met, you talked about you were involved in a project in Eindhoven. I just thought it might be interesting to reflect on that project in the light of some of the biotechnologies that you've seen across the week.
Yes, sure. So the project you're referring to is the Brainport Smart District in Eindhoven. So it's a whole district that is going to be built to accommodate new houses. So we're talking about several thousands of new housing, right, for families and so on, all inclusive. The municipality and all the partners involved, they have very good intentions in terms of, right, that the correct materials and to be really waste efficient in terms of construction and fast and cheap and everything and so on. Yet there are some really big challenges that are very hard to overcome. A very simple thing, for example, material availability. If you want to order this type of biomaterials en masse, right, you won't have, it's going to be a challenge to try and get them. Then if you come across a very new material, right, it's about certification, right, it's about warranties, it's about life cycle assessments, right. Then there's also a skepsis amongst people, right, okay, right, they say it might be so and so on, right, and have these qualities, but actually in real life, will it perform as such, and won't it cost me extra money to change that? Plus also the industry, construction industry, I think it's an international rule, is very risk averse. So even if we as architects, you might fully embrace, right, this type of technologies and materials, you might find that your collaborators might be, well, hold on a second, we're very comfortable with our process and the way things work. We do agree in principle with the said things, yet are we actually willing to take that risk, particularly from a monetary perspective for them?
Before I come to Adam on the question, or Adam Davies, I was just thinking, Adam West, what does it take to convince you to put a new material into one of your designs?
It's not always very difficult to convince an architect. It's convincing the client that's the challenge. And usually it starts off with a BBE certificate, you know, but I think the Grenfell disaster has shown that perhaps certification doesn't always answer all the questions. I think the biggest issue really is, you know, you need to it needs to be proven, and things have to go on buildings and last for a long time. You know, I did the structures that David was showing earlier. This mycelium, it's fascinating and amazing stuff, but you know, when you're spending a huge amount of money building something, you don't want it to be. You want to think that it's going to last and not be, you know, eaten in a few years' time.
And tell me, can you remember the last time you specified a new material and what that was?
A new material.
I think that pause say it again.
I couldn't.
No, I think that pause says it all. Adam, if we come to you, because you're definitely in the coal face, I think, you know, as someone who's developing product and also directly selling it, you know, so I take it you're not putting it through an agent. So you must face, well, do you face enormous challenges, or is it because you choose the customer in the right way? Are you looking for certain customers, or, you know?
Well, what we realized from the start, before when we first started, is that collaboration is key for us. So the more collaboration we have with brands and other like companies, the more exposure we get. So we're always looking for collaboration. But two things that we notice is that price point is critical. So we just we started to do a project for packaging out of mycelium. Large quantities, but the price point was still significantly more than what they expected. And they were willing to go towards mycelium, but then because the price wasn't where they were, they kind of just disregarded it, even though it was the better solution. So I think they're more swaying towards like a polystyrene type thing, which is fine, they can do that. But I think it's the expectation that these new materials will be cheap. which they will in the future, but right now it's going to be quite costly to do that on a large scale.
Mhm.
And then it comes back down to certification as well. So there's projects that we are starting and they need certification. We're doing more panels with our seaweed composite. And obviously with that going into interiors, they need to be certified and fire tested for that. But then there's the costs involved with that. We're a small studio, but to get them tested in that on that scale is quite costly. So it's trying to work out where we fit and how we can work with these brands and companies and make it profitable for us.
Mhm.
And just having, so we've been really fortunate. The response to our algae lights has been incredible. A lot of people and designers want to have them in their projects. But then it goes back to what Adam said about it's not convincing the architect or the interior designer, it's convincing the client that is the right thing.
And Adam, just sorry to interrupt. Adam West, do you see a shift in the client's understanding, or are they still at a kind of, even, I mean, Ben can tell you about the pain of putting up the ohm.
Yeah, that was really interesting.
In terms of sustainable, specifying even a 5% sustainable materials. Do you see a shift in the client?
There is definitely a shift in the client's kind of understanding of the issue, but at a really basic level, a lot of our clients are commercial clients. They're building things to make a profit, and at the moment there's I think sustainable materials just creates challenges, and that adds cost, and that's counter to what they want to do. I think there are other issues around sustainability where they've really bought into it because they can see it's a win-win situation. It makes it a more attractive home. It makes it a better community. Bringing nature into sort of new developments is all positive for them and doesn't actually cost them anything. And I think legislation is the thing that's going to make a real difference. It's not
Cristina,
until everybody's on the same playing field that they'll be prepared to.
Yeah, I mean, across the week we've also been hearing not just about new materials, but also about microbiome and also energy systems. I don't know if any of you caught any of those presentations. Is there anything in that, Cristina, that you think might present challenges? I mean, we will move on to the positive stuff in a minute, but just to dwell in this idea of what lies ahead and how we might overcome those things.
I think large-scale implementation is definitely challenging, particularly when it comes to the singular household, I believe, because there has to be incentive, really, if it comes from the government, if it's some sort of subsidies, right? Like we had at the very beginning with solar cells or wind farms, right? In Scotland, very specifically, right? So then probably yes, but right now also there are really very few case studies, right, that you could visit. For instance, if you are prospective client, home builder, right, and you'd like to see, okay, how does it actually look like to live in a house, right? Or how does it also feel like, right? What's the materiality? What is the smell of a house that's all built out of bio-based materials, for instance? And it's really hard to identify really buildings, like one-to-one scale, or even just rooms where you could experience this, to be really then motivated to invest the extra money because it's climate crisis, environmental crisis, etc.
And Adam, is there anything? I mean, are you seeing a shift in how your clients, or an uptake in interest?
Yeah, definitely. So we started in 2019, like I said, and when we first started, there was interest, but there wasn't much people buying. But since then, because we've had more consistent projects and the exposure that we've got from it, we've seen a shift of, so most of the time it's B2B for us, but especially this year, we've had a lot of people, just normal consumers, come and approach us for lighting. But we've never had that before because it's always been B2B and working on large scale projects. So I guess there is a shift. There is a slight change into people.
Do your clients or customers, do they ask about longevity, or is that not an issue with products?
They do. And that goes back down to what David was saying, is it's hard to really put a definitive of how long they're going to last. But we have projects. So the mycelium lights in the Berlin restaurant, they were commissioned in end of 2018, and they're still there now, and they're perfectly fine. And then Silo London, that was the start of 2019, no issues whatsoever. But I guess the more projects we do, the more longer.
Do you think, I mean, the culture of longevity is a really difficult one because it's embedded so much within architecture. Do you know, and obviously in previous generations, they had a much stronger understanding of maintenance, you know. I don't know if that's something that you think about in your practice, or how, you know, how you understand the requirement for maintenance in a building. How do you make that part of the process beyond the design and build element of what you do?
I mean, maintenance is pretty fundamental issue for all our clients, but I think what's interesting is that sort of with new sort of build to rent sectors and so on increasing, and local authorities starting to build housing again, they are the clients who are most interested in the embodied carbon, because I think they see in the future there are issues about that, but they're also interested in reduced energy consumption. And they're interested in making sure that their buildings will last a long time. So, you know, in some ways, the sort of things that we've been talking about now is seen as a very positive, but the issues of longevity may be more of an issue. But I mean, maybe it becomes more of a case of, here's a product, it doesn't cost the atmosphere, you know, it doesn't cost the environment anything, but you will have to replace it, and you think about how that can be done over time. And there's an understanding that every 10 years, you will still own the building, you will still be maintaining it, and you will have to maintain it and replace certain products in 10 years time. And maybe if that's a costed issue, you know, it's an affordable proposal, then maybe that's not such a problem.
And do you think, as architects and people involved in making products, we're honest about even the maintenance and upkeep of the designs that we make? You know, is that something we're honest about, the degree of maintenance even within current construction and materials? Because I don't think that necessarily comes across to someone who's buying or paying for a building, that there is even still within conventional materials a degree of maintenance.
That's right. I think you know, we talk about low maintenance materials, brick and aluminium, you know, but actually that people take that to mean zero maintenance.
Yeah. And let me just swing it from maintenance to the idea of aesthetic. I mean, Adam, you touched on it in your wobbly lampshades. Maybe this is, you know, also changes the aesthetic. Do you see that? I mean, I'm always caught with this idea that in Western Europe, we're obsessed with neat and tidiness. You know, it's almost the definition of our aesthetic at the moment. I wonder if you can talk to that.
Yeah, so we actually have seen a shift in this as well. So especially with our duvet lights, the client knew that it was a growing material, that we grew it before they were even shipped out. And they were quite keen to see them growing a little bit more in the restaurant hanging as a statement piece. So we actually allowed them, they didn't really fruit. What happens is they have these bulbous things of where they're about to fruit. And these were growing off the lamp, and they're quite interesting. So the light was evolving over time within the restaurant. And I think this whole clean, sleek looking material products, there is a change. There's the aesthetic of especially design, like interior, like lighting and that kind of thing. It's not as clean cut as it was 2 or 3 years ago. And I think our clients like that. The lights that we make are handmade, and there's slight imperfections or not imperfections added value to it because they're handmade.
And Cristina, do you have you experienced anything around the aesthetic of this?
Yeah. I think it's a huge opportunity. I believe that we're now in the very early phase of exploring and working with this type of materials. And right now, as a discipline, maybe particularly for architecture, but I would say also the whole of the design field, we're still looking for an appropriate material expression, simply because we haven't developed the very specific constructive systems that would go hand in hand with mycelium, that would go hand in hand with, right? Because if we look at bricks, no, right, the aesthetic of masonry and the brick comes right from the constructive principle, from the way the craftsmen, the workers work with it, right? And it's quite different to concrete. Also, if we look at the brutalist aesthetic, no, quite different to timber. Although no, within the different material fields, we can have all sorts of styles, but they're still very, very particular to the material and the constructive system. So I think there is still a lot to explore when it comes to biotechnology and architecture and the aesthetic expression. Because right now there's rather a tendency to use these materials on really skin level, almost as paneling, or really not. But again, because we're in an infancy phase, to try to turn them into bricks or similar volumetric modular things. So it's hard to say. On the other hand, there's then also the extreme computational design parametric approach, which to me also feels a bit, it might look more organic, as in growth, like developing from growth, but I think that's quite artificial. So we need to find ways maybe in which the expression of actual natural growth can be integrated within the aesthetic of the architecture, then developing over time and really understanding that, well, yes, there is going to be maybe a dramatic shift in the material expression, but it's all right.
Yeah, and of course, I think there's a lot of work that we as researchers can do and universities can do along that lines. But I'm wondering, Adam West, you know, that notion that the line you might draw ends up growing, ends up becoming something completely different. Is that something you think architects can reconcile themselves? But you know, we have this kind of identity of being quite precise and quite perfectionist.
Yeah.
It changes how you think about, I suppose, I don't know if you do work in conservation, but you can't draw a straight line when it comes to a historic building. It's impossible to do that. It makes no sense. But I wonder if you've thought through those aspects.
I can see architects maybe having more of a problem with that than the general public in a way. I mean, the people who buy homes, they, you know, the thing that they really love is the old character and the, you know, the gnarled beams and, you know, wobbly plasterwork on these ancient houses, you know, and I think an understanding of why it's like that is perhaps something that we can come to live with. But I think it's about control, isn't it, really, and understanding where things are and wanting them to be in the right place. I think I think the challenge really is actually is getting people to sort of to accept a new aesthetic. I know it's sort of very exciting to talk about new aesthetics in architecture, and you can see how stadia and sort of, you know, grand public buildings could sort of develop these forms and these structures and these ways of building. But at the end of the day, most people like to go home to really quite a traditional, you know, bit of bricks and mortar and home, and it's that, I think that's I don't know whether that's a challenge. It's just, I think it's just the human the way we are as people. There'll always be, you know, the artists and the architects and people who really enjoy something very, very different. But I'm looking at my background now, and Adam's there, and you know, I think that shift will be very, very slow. I think it was tried to do in the 50s, and it's coming back, but
but of course this isn't the aesthetic of the human anymore. We're talking about the aesthetic of the inhuman, you know, the things that are non-human. And they kind of, and many of us, as you say, you know, kind of also include wooden beams and kind of lots of plants in our houses, and so we live with all of that anyway. I suppose the big challenge is the invisible aspect of this new environment that we're going into, this new living building. I don't know if that's something that you think about, Cristina. Did that come up in your mind this week as something, you know, to be considered or to be challenging? I mean, the fact that many of the microbiome, or much of the microbiome, well, all of it is invisible to us, and we really don't know what goes on there. Is that something that induces fear or concern, or is that excitement, or?
Well, I think it's both. I think as for me at least, there is a huge knowledge gap. So for instance, I have asthma and it decides to come up spontaneously as it wishes. And we don't really know why, but it's clear that there's something in the air, right? So I guess that also in the light of the COVID crisis, right? You know, the invisible foe somewhere. But the moment that there is scientific evidence, right, and there are maybe sensors in your home which make the invisible or immaterial visible, so that you understand, okay, right, the walls are breathing around me, everything, right, this is the air quality right now due to the materials that were used, that are the flooring and so on, right? I think if there are mechanisms to really make it legible and quantifiable to the inhabitants, I think that's the biggest challenge, and then one understands the benefits or can see it, and it makes more sense, and one's maybe more comfortable than being in that environment. But I think there's so many parallels. It's like with our own bodies. You can't really, you know, tell what is happening unless you have some negative symptoms, and then you go to a doctor and it's say, oh, okay, right, these are the test results. So if we would have similar protocols for our houses, I think that would make it unproblematic, and one could really understand the benefits then, how our environment impacts us. And there, just a short note, I don't remember where I read it recently, how much the most construction materials are off-gassing still, even 5 years after they've been built into our environments. And I found it very surprising, and we never think really about it, and we can't even really tell, but it's still there, the chemicals.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we're getting used to our houses being filled of sensors and indicators and things that talk to us without being asked to talk to us. And I'm not just talking about children, but I kind of want to move on to the positives, or the opportunities and that kind of excitement, the future imaginations. And Adam Davies, I kind of want to begin with you by asking, where do you think your business is going to be in the next 10, 15, 25 years? What do you think you'll be making in 25 years' time?
Oh, wow. So we're very fortunate. We've just started a new project, which is the Do Better project. And what we've also been commissioned to do is, the whole point of the project is to have the world's first zero waste town. And it's based in Sweden. And what we've been asked to do is work with people who live there and work there to use their waste. So for instance, we're working with a local brewery. So we're taking the spent grain from the brewery and turning it into new materials and products from that. And we're also working with a glass studio there, and she produces a lot of glass waste. And what they're doing for the project is building social housing. So what we want to do is work with a glass studio to make glass paneling for these new houses. So what I'm thinking in the future for Syml is that we're going to be doing more projects where we look at local waste, work with local people and use their waste to be used locally more than anything else. Because this waste is a huge problem for a lot of people, because especially the glass studio, she pays a lot of money to get it taken away by the municipal. And if we can just release that burden so she doesn't have to pay to have that waste taken away, then that's a great thing to start with. And we hate using the word waste, because to us, this material still has value. There's so much value in it. It can be used for so much more. Why discard it? So we strongly feel that it's going to become local, and we're going to be working on local projects all over the world on these type of things.
No, that's great, Adam. That's a great vision. To use all the waste of everybody else around. You know, whatever's going free, you're going to adapt into your practice. I think that's an amazing thing to think about. And Adam West, whenever you think about the next, I mean, architecture is slow, much slower than product design, you know, and it's deeply conservative in many ways as a practice. But where do you think the opportunities of these technologies may lie? Where do you think the first place of uptake might be?
I'm really excited by what Adam just said about this place in Sweden. Actually, that sounds terrific. I mean, yeah, reuse of waste is something which I really, I see as being fundamental to, the future. Really, I think trying to develop ways of building, mass housing with, massively reduced amounts of embodied carbon is a big challenge. Timber is obviously the starting point, but because we already understand so much about it. But I think that anything which can there's a move in that direction, whether it's energy from waste, or new forms of energy creation, that will just sort of stop me feeling so bad about what the profession that I'm in.
Did you see David Benjamin's use of AI on the timber boarding?
No, it's beautiful. They're really
Incredible,
clever.
isn't it?
Yeah.
It's definitely something that, given our current stock of timber in the UK, that might be something that we should be thinking. I mean, obviously, it's a way to really quickly scan the quality of timber and also use it in different ways. So I think that notion of timber and mass housing is definitely seems a very interesting pursuit. Cristina, what about you? Where do you think the opportunities, and where do you dream we might be in 5-10 years time, 15-25 years time?
I hope that we would have a construction industry that is as automized or going that directions, for instance, the automobile industry, like the car industry, and a form of intelligent automation when it comes to that, right? So from on-site smart factories to then remote smart factories, and just that the whole production chain, because that's the place where a lot of the waste is coming from, really, right? Is that much optimized that waste is being drastically reduced, but also just the nature of labor that relates to the construction industry can and should change drastically, but also there's this very interesting concepts of building, for instance, houses like material banks. So right, you build them for disassembly. You know that the office building, the whatever function, right, you might not need it in 70 years time, and you have non-fixed or permanent joints. So I'd like to see things moving into that direction.
I mean, some of the things you've talked about are not necessarily reliant on biotechnologies, but biotechnologies has a role to play within that. Is that how you see it?
Yes, I think so. So I think just normalizing biotechnology as being part of that whole loop, where it's not where we get maybe to the point where it's not even worth mentioning anymore that something is out of algae or mycelium based, because it's just so normal and what we expect it to be.
Yeah, fantastic. So
I think
Adam West.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say the one thing that we haven't talked about really at all, which I think is the biggest challenge, and I really hope that the work that's being done now will sort of biotechnology or whatever will help, because I think it's at that level of detail, is the existing building stock. We're talking an awful lot about building new things and more things, but the amount of existing stock out there is so much bigger than what we're building new, and we're not going to just replace it. I think it's a way of finding solutions to that problem, which I guess is more related to energy than material, embodied materials.
It could be both, it could be both. And just a final comment, if you want to add into it, and I think we'll finish and pass on to our colleagues. But Adam Davies, is there anything you want to add, or Cristina?
Basically just that I'm excited to hear everything that's happened today, especially from what David Benjamin has said. It's very exciting. And coming from a background in mycelium myself, I know the limitations and then the issues that surround mycelium, how to grow it in specific conditions can be very challenging. I've seen it being successfully applied to these applications it's incredible.
It raises the game, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's another level, I think. Cristina or Adam, any final thoughts?
Well, I hope that BBE becomes an international household name, that in, I don't know, 20, 30 years time, it's going to be like, all right, when we have something about biotechnology in the built environment, it's the thing to go to and to get knowledge from and advice. So I really hope that it's a thriving hub and loads and lots of successful case studies and research to follow up in the coming years.
Thank you
Yeah,
so much, Cristina and Adam.
I would second that, and I hope that I can come to you in the next year or so with a project.
We hope so too, Adam. And as we've been saying all along, I mean, this territory is definitely one that requires all hands to the deck. You know, we have to set aside our kind of personal politics and our misunderstandings of one another and our lack of ability to talk across different, disciplines, and we have to come together and work as teams. So we really believe in that in BBE, which I think at some level might supplant the BBC. Could that be right? Because it seems to be on its way out. But anyway, on that rather weird note, can I really thank each of you for your contribution? I mean, that is really invaluable. I've taken loads of notes. I mean, I'm very interested in that triad of construction, automation, and low carbon waste and existing building stock. Those are kind of key points that you somehow brought us towards at the end. That was really great. Your input has been invaluable and will continue to be invaluable, because all of this is recorded and will help people watching this over and over again in the months ahead and analysing, the discussions, I would imagine. So thank you very much for contributing to this, online open archive. Can I also thank the Responsible Interactions team on a very personal level? I've never had this level of teaminess in my career. So just thank you so much for that. And on a professional level, it makes all the difference to the experience and the quality of the work that we're engaged in. And on behalf of the Responsible Interactions team, can I thank all of our colleagues right across HBBE who have worked with us both very generously, very patiently to get us to this point that we're currently at. And we're looking forward to the remainder of this amazing collaborative journey, but only after summer when we've had a good break. With that, I'm going to hand over to my colleagues to say the final word. I think we've got Gary and Gary and Martin, and I'm trying to lose my slides. I'm trying to get rid of you. So hold on. Have I stopped?
Thank you, Ruth. I don't think you're sharing anymore.
Oh, great. Thank you. Yeah, we're done.
Thanks, Ruth.
Thanks,
everybody.
Is that it?
That's it. Well, it's nearly it.
Thank you.
It's nearly it. Stay with me for 10 more minutes. You guys can turn off your cameras, or indeed keep them on if you wish. In fact, everyone can turn on their cameras if they want to be seen for this final moment. But so we Gary and I, we have to sum this up. We have to sum everything up. It's nearly impossible. I couldn't sum up Wednesday, and I can't sum up the whole week. But I think this session maybe was a good summing up in its own right. I think what you've seen over the last 4 days is an opportunity for us to juxtapose all of the different things that are going on in the hub with all of the things that are going on internationally. And we've had some really, really exciting speakers over the last few days. I hope that juxtaposition becomes a synthesis, and that's the idea that we ultimately, and I'm channeling Cristina's energy into imagining that the BBE is going to become a brand name in the future. That's the kind of idea, but at the very least, we want things to grow literally and metaphorically. And so we hope that this is the start of a more open platform, something that everybody will be able to contribute to. And I think seeing the comments in the comments box over the last 4 days in YouTube, there's quite a lot of people out there who would like to be part of this, who would like to be presenting their own works and their own ideas and their own thoughts. And so I hope that this will be the beginning of that. Gary, I don't know whether you have anything and your thoughts to...
Yeah, just the range of topics that we covered in the last 4 days is just immense, really. I think of any conference I've ever been to before, I thought, yes, that was excellent. I quite like keynote talks and some short talks as well. I thought it was a good combination there. And the discussion session today, I thought was really good and really informative. The microboards, as far as the posters was concerned, I think that sort of worked, but obviously that's probably never as good as a physical meeting where you're actually wandering around the posters, and hopefully we can have that next year, because that would be really nice.
Yeah. So I think that just leaves me to say a few thank yous as well. So I mean, first of all, thank you if you're still with us after 4 days on the YouTube. I don't know what our numbers are at the moment. If you stayed through every single presentation, congratulations. There is no prize other than the richness of the knowledge that you've been exposed to. But if you didn't, and I suspect 1 or 2 people didn't, all of this will be on our YouTube channel. In fact, I think I'm right in saying that it's kind of already there. So the raw video, as it was, with all of the technical bits and pieces that have gone wrong and the hesitations and all that it's all going to be there. It's all on the YouTube channel. But what we will do over the next 2 months is to edit that down, take individual sections and put them up and hopefully categorize them in a way that can be easily found. And we expect this archive to grow and to be used. And I'm sure many people will be accessing this asynchronously. So, but thank you for listening. And thank you for your comments in the chat. Speaking as someone who's chaired the sessions, you get terrified when there are no questions, and that hasn't happened, thankfully. There's been lots and lots of activity and questions the whole time. So thank you to you. Thank you to the organizers for the different sessions. So each of the days has been curated by a different team. So today, of course, has been Ruth, Ben and Carmen. Thank you so much for curating your day the day before. Gary, myself and Mung on the day before that. So I'm going to thank myself and Mung as well. And then Darren for the first day as well. So thank you guys for curating your sessions. This is what teamwork is. This is why the HBBE exists. We can't do it on our own. Thank you, and probably the biggest thank you should go to our speakers for the last 4 days. I think with almost no exceptions, really, everyone that we asked to come and speak to us came and spoke to us. And so we put together this dream team list, and I was sat in meetings where we thought, are we going to get these guys? Oh, these are big names. These are people who are really, really busy. They've probably got lots of better things to do. They didn't. They came, they presented, they gave us what we asked for. And yeah, it's been extraordinary, and there's a lot to think about and a lot to go over. And a lot of these presentations I will be revisiting again and listening to over and over again. So thank you to our presenters. And then also thank you to the overall organizational team for this event. It's not easy, it's fair to say. There's a degree of relief in my household. Mung is just sitting around the back of me here. That it is day 4. It's taken a lot of time. This has been planning for about 6 months and has become close to a full-time job for a number of us in the last few weeks. Thank you to the engagement committee who are here, and importantly, thank you to Mung Zhang, who organized it all. She's sitting behind me, just looking at me in a funny way. She's not going to come on screen. No, she's not going to do that. So, but thank you to her. Yeah, it's been quite something to try and coordinate all of this stuff, but I think it's worked very well. And last but definitely not least, and maybe actually most importantly of all, we should thank but actually Claire, who is not here right now, but who's been working behind the scenes, and most of all, Peter Starr, who has battled through an awful lot actually over the past few weeks. And I think you're about to go on holiday, right? So the moment Zoom goes off, you are in a car and you are going away for at least a long weekend. Is that right, Peter?
Yeah, no, I'm going to be in the car in 30 minutes time driving down to Wales. So yeah, it'll be perfect end to a really, really enjoyable week.
zone out. So, I mean, it's the amount of kind of technical support and the things that you guys don't see going back and forth. And it's quite something. And it has been, I mean, more than a full-time job for Peter for the last 2 or 3 weeks to get all of this set up, and the thousands of emails and checkings and times and all of those kind of things. We can't do this without the support of Peter and the support of Claire. It just wouldn't work. And that just brings me to my final thank you, of course, which is to our funder, Research England. This is all funded by Research England. The BBE is funded by Research England. The whole of the infrastructure, the OHM, everything that you see comes through this UK RI funding. We hope that by the end of the funding period, we have enough coming in, which is why I was one of the people who was asking the question of David Benjamin about where he gets his funding from, because we're always looking for it. And to say to anybody that we're always looking for collaborators, we're a hub. So we're deliberately not a research center, we're a hub, and that's a hub for other people's activity as well, because we're aware, I think as Ruth mentioned earlier on, that while we have some extraordinary people and expertise within the hub, we don't cover it all by any means, and we're only as good as the people that we're going to collaborate with, both in academia, but also in industry. And I think that the last session picked up on that. So thank you to all. Gary, have I missed anybody? Is there anybody? I'm sure I have.
I'm sure you'll find out if you have.
I'll get an email.
I think you missed Gary.
Yes, me. No,
Oh,
you
Gary,
didn't.
yeah,
No, you
thank
didn't.
you. No,
you didn't. You thanked
you
me.
were
And
there.
And you missed Gareth Southgate as well.
Well, I wasn't going to get
I
into
was-
football because I'm aware that we have an international audience that might also involve people from Denmark or indeed people from Italy, which was not necessarily going to go. But it's come up anyway. So yes, good luck.
I'd give a quick thank you to Romy and Monica as well, who have done an awful lot on social media, Twitter, Instagram and stuff, weeks building up and during this week as well. So that would be the only additional names I'd throw in to say a big thank you to them as well.
Absolutely, and we should also add to that the various PhD students and RAs who've been also doing this shuttling back and forth from Zoom to YouTube and sharing the questions with us and doing all that kind of stuff. There's been 2 or 3 people, including I know Thor and Armanda here, who've both been doing that for today, but there've been other people involved in that this week as well. So yes, thank you to them. I think that's nearly everybody. Thank you to anybody in the world who I've forgotten, and I apologize if we have. So I think that's it. I think that brings us to a close now. So we will hopefully see you next year, one way or another. And I really hope, I don't know how it will form next year, but I hope that there's at least an element of in-person and that we will be able to show you around the OHM in real time with real prototypes. And get together and carry on some of the amazing conversations that I've started this week. Thank you very much.